Every keeper of the long vaults learns the same sentence before they learn the workings of a stasis cell, before the chemistry of the sleep gases, before the rituals of inventory and the long arithmetic of preservation. They learn it the way the young of my species learn that certain depths of the home oceans are not to be sung into, by being told once, gravely, and then never told again. The sentence is short. Whatever else you forget, never wake the humans. I learned it 400 cycles ago in the training cloisters of the archive on Lane, recited to me by an instructor whose light had gone dim with age and who delivered the words and then said nothing further, as though the silence after them was itself part of the lesson. I was young then, by the measure of my kind, which is to say I was already older than most species ever become. I thought the silence was reverence. I thought a great many things in those cycles that the rest of my life would slowly take apart. My name is Sethri Vale. I am a Liorn, a keeper of records, and I have spent the better part of my existence in the quiet work of preservation. We are not a people who do things quickly. We luminesce when we think, a slow tidal glow along the body, and our conversations can take days, and we are trusted across the settled galaxy with the things no one else wants the burden of remembering. The dead languages, the closed treaties, the vaults. I was assigned, in what I assumed would be the unremarkable final stretch of my service, to Hesper Reach, a small moon at the cold edge of a system no trade route bothered with, where humanity had been laid to sleep so long ago that almost no one living had ever seen a human awake. Hesper Reach was a tomb that pretended to be a sanctuary, or a sanctuary that history had let curdle into a tomb. 40,000 stasis cells in concentric rings beneath the regolith, each one holding a single human body in the gray suspension of the long sleep. The vault ran itself. My task was a decommissioning audit, the verification that the systems were stable enough to be transferred to fully automated stewardship, so that no living keeper would ever need to be posted there again. It was, I understood, the last small step in the galaxy's long project of forgetting that the humans had ever existed at all. I did not question this. I believed, as everyone believed, that the rule was a wall around a danger. I came to count the cells and confirm the wall. I had been at Hesper Reach for 9 days when I found the first thing that did not belong. It was minor. Cell 14 third ring registered a fractional rise in neural activity during a routine resonance sweep, a flicker, the kind of reading that any of the vault's automated systems would have logged and discarded, because stasis is never perfectly silent. The sleeping mind drifts, and the cells are built to tolerate drift. I logged it. I noted the moment. I expected the reading to settle back into the flat gray line that every other cell held, the line I had watched for 9 days without variation. I went to attend to other duties and returned a quarter shift later to confirm the settling. The line had not settled. Cell 14 was holding its flicker steady, a small persistent ember in a field that the record said had been uniformly cold for longer than my entire species had been spacefaring. I queried the Vault Stewardship Corps. The Corps reported the reading as within tolerance and recommended no action. I checked the historical logs. In the full operational history of Hesper Reach, no cell had ever held a sustained rise. Not once. The thing the Corps called within tolerance had never happened before. I am, by temperament and by training, not given to alarm. I am given to documentation. So I documented and I watched, and the next morning, by the moon's slow reckoning, Cell 14 woke. Not woke fully, but rose, the way 14 had risen, the flat line lifting into the low, restless rhythm of a mind beginning to surface, and then 14 and then 14 each one further along the third ring than the last, each one rising at an interval I did not want to measure but measured anyway, because measuring is the only thing I have ever truly known how to do. The interval between each cell's first rise was constant. 3 hours and 40 minutes repeating without variation, moving outward along the ring like a finger drawn slowly across a row of sleeping faces. And the thing that cooled the light in my body to almost nothing was not the waking. Cells could fail. Suspension could degrade. Those things in theory happened. The thing that frightened me was the regularity, because failure is ragged and decay is chaotic, and this was neither. This was a sequence. Something was waking the humans of Hesper Reach in a deliberate, patient, perfectly ordered procession. And whatever it was had known the layout of every cell before it began. I opened a priority channel to the Regional Stewardship Authority and reported a sequenced anomalous wake event in a sealed human vault. It took 11 hours for anyone to answer, and when they answered, it was a junior administrator with the flat, exhausted manner of someone who had decided long ago that nothing in their jurisdiction was ever truly an emergency. I described the sequence. I described the interval. I told her the cells were not failing but waking, in order, as if to a schedule. She told me to confirm my instruments, file a formal report, and expect review within the standard 90-day window. I confirmed my instruments. They were perfect. While I confirmed them, cell 14U's unwoke, 3 hours and 40 minutes exactly after the last. So I stopped reporting in the standard manner and began, instead, to look. I pulled the construction archive for Hesper Reach, the original engineering record from when the vault was sealed. The full schematic of the cell array had been documented once, at sealing, and then placed under a classification so old that the bureau that had issued it no longer existed under that name. The layout of the cells was not a thing a passing salvager could read. It was not a thing that decay could follow in order. Whatever was working its way through the third ring was working from a map, and the map was secret. And that meant the thing waking the humans either possessed a 4,000-cycle-old classified schematic, or did not need one because it had drawn the schematic itself. I ran a deep resonance scan of the vault's foundations, the kind of slow manual sweep that the automated systems never bother with, and I found, beneath the hum of 40,000 sleeping minds, a second signal, faint, coming from below the cells from the vault's sealed core, which the decommissioning order had instructed me not to open. It was not noise. It had structure, the deliberate mathematical structure of something built to be recognized as language by whoever finally listened closely enough to hear it. And braided into that signal, like a key left in a lock, was a fragment of an address. Not to a place, to a person or a role, to whoever finally remembers. I sat for a long while in the cold light of the vault, listening to that phrase repeat, and then I did the thing I had been told not to do. I cross-referenced the resonance signature of the external trigger, the rhythm that was waking the cells, against every entry in the archive's threat catalog. I found nothing, which was itself impossible because the archive's threat catalog is complete. It is the most complete thing my people have ever made. And then I found the absence. A single entry, deep in the oldest stratum of the catalog, that had been purged. Not deleted, purging leaves no trace, but redacted, which leaves the shape of a thing without its substance. The shape was old, older than the vault, and the resonance signature waking the humans of Hesper Reach matched the redacted entry's residual metadata to a precision that left no room for coincidence. The vault was not malfunctioning. The vault was responding. Something the galaxy had erased from its own memory was coming back, and the humans, asleep beneath my feet, were waking to meet it. I did not sleep that night, in the way our kind sleeps, settled and dimmed. I held my light steady and I worked, because the alternative was to sit with what I was beginning to understand, and I was not ready. It was Oru Tannik who found me at it. Tannik was the salvage pilot who had ferried me to Hesper Reach, a wiry, plain-spoken being of a minor species that the larger powers tended to overlook, which had made Tannik, over a long career, very good at noticing what larger powers overlooked. He had stayed in orbit longer than his contract required because, he said, the moon gave him a bad feeling, and Tannik trusted bad feelings the way I trusted instruments. He came down to resupply, and found me surrounded by the worst 9 days of record-keeping I had produced in 400 cycles. I showed him everything. The sequence, the interval, the secret map being followed without a map, the signal in the core, the redacted entry, the returning resonance. Tanik went through all of it slowly, which surprised me because I had taken him for a fast thinker and discovered instead that he was a careful one, which is a rarer thing. When he was done, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he asked me how many people had seen this data, and I told him only the junior administrator and only in summary. He nodded slowly and said something I have never forgotten. He said, "Copy all of it, Vale, everything. Put it somewhere off this moon, somewhere it cannot be reached and cannot be edited, and do it before anyone with authority arrives." I asked him why. He looked at the rings of sleeping cells and he said, "Because a vault this old with a secret this big does not stay secret by accident. Someone is keeping it, and the people who keep a thing buried do not thank you for digging." I copied everything. I sent it to 3 separate archive nodes under my personal seal, encrypted, with instructions that they open automatically if my seal went silent for more than 30 days. I had never done such a thing in my life. Every record I had ever made had gone through proper channels into proper custody. The act of hiding information from my own institution felt like stepping off a ledge in the dark, and I did it anyway, and Tanik watched me do it and said nothing, which was its own kind of company. The keeper arrived 2 days later. I had not known there were still keepers. They were, in my understanding, a closed order, a relic of the sealing, devotees who had taken the doctrine not as a regulation, but as a faith. I had assumed they had dwindled into nothing along with everything else about the humans. I was wrong. His name was Doran Keth, and he came down to Hesper Reach alone in a small gray vessel with the sigil of the sealed cell on its hull, and he moved through the vault with the unhurried certainty of a man walking through his own home. He was old, though not as old as I, and his every motion had the economy of someone who had spent a lifetime in service to a single idea. He did not introduce himself so much as confirm that I knew who he was. Then he looked at the 3rd ring, at the cells now risen into restless half-waking, and his face did not change, but his voice when he spoke had the quality of a door closing. "You will reverse the wake cycle," he said. "You will return these cells to full suspension, and you will erase your findings, and you will leave Hesper Reach, and you will speak of this to no one." I told him the cells were not waking by malfunction. I told him about the returning resonance, the redacted entry, the thing coming back from beyond the system's edge. I expected this to matter to him. It did not. He listened with complete attention and complete indifference, the way a man listens to whether he has already decided to walk through, and when I had finished he said only, "The doctrine does not contain an exception for fear. The humans sleep. That is the whole of the law. Whatever you believe is coming, the answer is the same answer it has always been. They are not to be woken. Better the galaxy face what comes asleep to the truth than awake to them." I understood then that Doran Keth was not a man who did not know the truth. He was a man who knew it and had built his entire life upon refusing it. That is a harder thing to move than ignorance. Ignorance can be corrected. Devotion can only be broken. He gave me until the moon's next dawn to begin revering the cycle. Then he went to the vault's chapel, a small bare room I had not entered, and I went back to the core, and I did the second thing I had been told not to do. I opened it. The core of Hesper Reach was not a machine. It was a room, and in the room was a chair, and in the chair, preserved not in stasis but in the simple incorruptible cold of vacuum, was a recording device of human make, worn smooth at its edges by a hand that had held it many times. It was waiting. It had been waiting for longer than my civilization had possessed a written language. When I activated it, a voice filled the core, a human voice, a woman's, level and unhurried, and carrying underneath its calm the particular weariness of someone recording a message they hope will never need to be heard. "I am Commander Naomi Hart," the voice said. "If you are hearing this, then either we have been gone long enough that you have finally come to take an honest accounting of us, or the thing we put to sleep has woken before we have. I am hopping for the first. I am recording this in case of the second." What followed, across the long hours of that night, was not the story I had been raised on. It was its exact inversion, and the precision of the inversion was the thing that convinced me, because lies are usually clumsy, and this was too clean, too complete, too consistent with every silence I had ever noticed in the official record and never thought to question. Hart's account, supported by data layers attached to the recording, technical, dated, signed, told it plainly. There had been an enemy once in the galaxy's deep past, not a species, a process, something that did not conquer worlds but unmade them, that ate the order out of matter and left behind only a spreading gray nothing, and that could not be reasoned with because there was no one inside it to reason with. The settled powers of that age had no answer to it. They were losing. They were, by Hart's calm accounting, perhaps a generation from losing entirely. And the humans, then a young and reckless and dangerous species, exactly as dangerous as the legend said, had found the answer. Not a weapon that destroyed the thing, because it could not be destroyed. A method that contained it, that folded it back into a dormancy as deep as death, and sealed it behind a barrier that would hold for as long as the barrier was maintained. The cost of building that seal had been most of humanity. The cost of maintaining it was a watch that would have to be kept for longer than any civilization had ever kept anything. And so humanity, what remained of it, had made an arrangement with the powers it had saved. They would sleep. They would lie down in the long vaults as a reserve, a held breath, a last line on the single promise that if the seal ever failed, if the unmade thing ever stirred, the galaxy would wake them, because they alone knew how to put it down again. We did not ask to be remembered fondly, Hart said. We asked to be remembered accurately. We asked you to keep the seal and to keep the watch and to wake us if it ever came back. That was the whole of the bargain. I am recording this because I do not entirely trust that you will keep it. I have seen how the powers that survive a war prefer to remember the ones who won it for them. I think you may find it easier to be afraid of us than grateful to us. I think you may in time decide that a debt you cannot repay is better buried than honored. If I am wrong, I am glad. If I am right, then know this. We did not fall asleep. We lay down on purpose for you, and we trusted you to call us when it mattered. The rule was never wake the humans. The rule was wake us when the dark comes back. Someone changed it. Ask yourself who, and ask yourself why, and then do the right thing because we are about to. The recording ended. I sat in the cold core of Hesper Reach with 40,000 sleeping saviors above me, and the residue of 4,000 cycles of a deliberate, shameful, civilization-spanning lie settling into me like cold into stone. The galaxy had not caged a monster. It had buried a debt. And the rule I had recited as a child, the rule I had come to this moon to help erase forever, had been built not to protect the galaxy from humanity, but to protect the galaxy from the memory of what it had done to the people who saved it. Above me, the third ring went on waking. Below the system's edge, the dark came back. I went up out of the core into the vault, and I found Doran Keth waiting, and I saw in his face that he already knew what I had found, because of course he knew. The Keepers had always known. That was the entire purpose of the Keepers. They did not guard the humans from the galaxy. They guarded the lie from the truth. I did not waste time on accusation. I told him the seal was failing. I told him the resonance was the unmade thing stirring, that the vault was waking on its own because the humans had built it to wake when the dark returned, that the bargain was being honored by the machinery of the sleepers even as his order tried to break it. And I told him I was going to finish what the vault had started. I was going to wake them. He stood between me and the wake control with the stillness of a man who had imagined this moment for his entire life and had always assumed he would win it. You do not understand what they are, he said. I have read the same records you have. I have read more. They ended the war, yes. And do you know what they were, the ones who built that seal? They were terrible archivists. They did things to win that war that I will not say aloud in a room with their children sleeping in it. The doctrine is not a lie told out of shame. It is a wall built out of wisdom. We do not wake them because we have seen what the galaxy becomes when it needs them, and we decided rightly that we would rather face the dark ourselves than become the kind of galaxy that survives only by waking gods who frighten us. It was, I have to say, the best argument anyone made to me in the whole of that long event, and I have thought about it many times since. He was not wrong that there was danger in them. He was only wrong about which danger was the larger one. I told him so. I told him the dark would not negotiate with his principles, that a galaxy too proud to honor its debts would simply be a galaxy unmade with its pride intact, and that the choice he was defending was not the choice between safety and danger, but the choice between two dangers, one of which we had a chance to survive, and one of which we did not. He did not move, so I did the only thing left. I told him that I had already sent everything off the moon, that the truth was no longer a thing he could keep, that whether he stood aside or not, the galaxy was about to learn what it had done, and the only question remaining was whether it would learn it in time to be saved. For a long moment he did not move at all. Then, slowly, with the particular grief of a man watching the structure of his entire life come apart in his hands, Doran Keth stepped aside, not because I had defeated him, because some part of him, the part the doctrine had never quite managed to bury, had been waiting 4,000 cycles for someone to give him permission to stop. I have wondered since whether every keeper before him had carried that same buried hope and died without ever being given the moment to act on it. I think they probably had. I think that is the cruelest thing the doctrine ever did, and it did many cruel things. I woke them. The full wake cycle of a human stasis cell takes the better part of a day, and so the awakening of Hesper Reach came not as a single moment but as a slow rising tide, ring after ring, the gray suspension clearing, the long-sleeping mind surfacing one after another into a present that had forgotten them. I had braced myself, I will admit, for monsters. The doctrine had done its work on me too. What rose instead were people. Tired, disoriented, deeply human people, blinking in the cold light, asking for water, asking the date, asking with a dawning and terrible understanding exactly how long they had been under, and exactly what it meant that they were being woken at all. Commander Naomi Hart was among the first ring to fully wake, and she was smaller than her voice had made me imagine, and her eyes when they found me were very steady. She looked at me, a Liorn, an archivist, a being of a species that had not yet built its first starship when she lay down to sleep, and she understood the whole of the situation before I said a word. "How long?" she asked. I told her. She took it the way you take a blow you have spent your whole life expecting. Then she asked the only question that mattered. "Is it back?" I told her it was. And Naomi Hart, who had slept through the rise and fall of empires, who had been betrayed by the entire galaxy she had bled to save, nodded once and said, "All right. Let's get to work." No fury, no accusation, just a soldier confirming that the thing she had lain down to be ready for had finally come, and that she was, as promised, ready. It was in those first hours that I encountered the thing about them I have never fully understood and have come, in the end, to love. Hart's people, mustering with grim efficiency toward a war they had been asleep for, kept giving the most terrible things the gentlest names. The unmade horror crossing the edge of the system, the process that ate the order out of matter, the entity that my people's threat catalog had not even dared to keep an honest entry for, the humans called Old Mercy. I asked Hart why. She was pulling on a pressure suit that had waited 4,000 cycles for her, and she said, without looking up, because the first crew that ever saw it said the only mercy it offered was that it was quick. The name stuck. She shrugged. "We name things Veil, helps us hold them. You can't fight what you can't look at, and you can't look at something that big without giving it a small enough name to fit in your mouth." I did not understand it then. I have a small enough name in my mouth for it now. Old Mercy crossed into the system on the third day, and the galaxy's modern fleets, which had by then begun to gather in response to my broadcast, learned in the first hour what humanity had learned in a war the rest of us had erased. It could not be fought the way anything is fought. It did not have ships to destroy or a will to break. It was a spreading absence, and the modern fleets, for all their elegance and all their centuries of advancement, fell into it and were unmade, their order eaten, their matter forgotten, leaving behind only the spreading gray. Watching it on the vault's old instruments, I understood the true scale of the lie my people had told. We had not buried a monster we had defeated. We had buried the only beings who had ever survived something we could not even survive looking at. That was the moment I made my own choice, the small specific choice that was the only thing in this entire account that was ever truly mine. The galaxy's authorities, panicking now, fragmented and frightened, had begun to argue. Some demanded the humans be thrown at Old Mercy immediately and entirely, as a weapon, as the asset the doctrine had secretly always considered them to be. Others, terrified of the precedent of the debt, of what it would mean to be saved again by the people they had wronged, argued for sealing the vault, resuspending the humans, and facing the dark on the galaxy's own terms rather than owe a debt that could never be repaid. The decision was being made in closed channels by frightened people in the dark, so I took it out of the dark. I broadcast Commander Hart's recording, in full, on every open frequency, to every settled world, alongside the redacted threat entry and 4,000 cycles of falsified record. I made it impossible to quietly rebury what had been dug up. I made the galaxy watch its own face. I do not know that it changed the outcome of the war. Hart had a plan already, and I think she would have executed it regardless of what the galaxy decided, because she had not been woken to ask permission. But it changed what the galaxy was while the war was fought. It meant that humanity went into that fight not as a secret weapon deployed in shame, but as a people seen, named, owed, with the whole galaxy finally watching honestly. I have come to believe that mattered, not to the physics of the seal. To the rest of it, to everything that came after. The humans did not destroy Old Mercy. It cannot be destroyed. That was the entire tragedy and the entire reason for the seal. What they did was harder and stranger, and in its way more humane. Hart's people had not spent their pre-sleep generation only building a seal. They had built, and slept beside, the means to rebuild it, a method, a vast and delicate and costly working that folded the unmade thing back down into dormancy, and wrapped it again in a barrier meant to hold. It took everything they had. It took, in the end, more than they had. The working required a sustaining presence at its heart, a watch that could not be automated, a crew that would have to hold the seal as it formed, and not all of them came back from holding it. Naomi Hart was one of the ones who did not come back. She went into the heart of the working knowing she would not return, the same way she had lain down in the vault knowing she might wake to exactly this, and she did it with the same lack of fuss, because she had decided long ago what she was for. The last thing she said to me, over a channel, as the seal closed around her, was about the name. "Tell them," she said, "that Old Mercy is asleep again, and tell them to write it down right this time." Then she was gone, folded into the long quiet at the center of the thing she had spent 2 lives putting down. It was Doran Keth who held the other end of the working. I did not expect that. The man who had spent his life keeping the humans asleep took a station in the seal's outer lattice that no one else of my generation's frailty could survive. And he held it, and he lived barely. And when I asked him afterward why a keeper of the doctrine had given the last of his strength to the people his whole order existed to suppress, he was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Because I was wrong, and a man who has been wrong for his whole life owes the truth more than a comfortable death." He paused, and because she asked me to, and no one had ever asked the keeper for anything except his silence. I have thought about that sentence more than almost any other in this account. The loneliest thing in the galaxy, it turns out, is to be the keeper of a secret no one ever asks you to share. The humans won, at the cost I have described and others I have not, and then they did the thing that no power in the galaxy's long frightened history had predicted, the thing the doctrine had been built specifically to prevent and had, in the preventing, almost guaranteed. They did nothing. They did not avenge themselves on the galaxy that had buried them. They did not seize the standing their salvation had earned them and turn it into dominion. The survivors of Hesper Reach, what remained of them after the seal, gathered the rest of their sleeping kind from the vaults the galaxy had scattered them across, and they asked for one thing only: to be remembered accurately, to have the record corrected, to be, at last, neither feared nor worshipped but simply known, a people who had saved the galaxy twice and asked, both times, for nothing but the truth. The doctrine was struck from the records of every settled world within the cycle. It was not enough to repeal it. The new accord, the structure that rose out of the war, insisted it be replaced, because a wall is not undone by being abandoned but by being understood. I was asked, as the archivist who had broken it, to draft the sentence that would take its place, the line that the keepers of the new vaults would learn before anything else. I thought about it for a long time. I thought about Hart's voice in the cold core, level and weary, and trusting against all evidence that someone would finally listen. I thought about Doran Keth holding the seal and admitting, after 4,000 cycles of his order's silence, that he had been wrong. I thought about a galaxy that had looked at the people who saved it and chosen to be afraid rather than grateful, and had called that fear a law, and had taught it to its children as wisdom. And I wrote down the truth, which had been there the whole time, underneath the rule, waiting like a key in a lock for whoever finally remembered. The old law had said, whatever else you forget, never wake the humans. It had taught us to believe that the humans were the sleepers, the danger held in suspension, the thing best left in the dark. But the humans had never been asleep, not truly. They had lain down on purpose, watchful even in their stillness, faithful to a bargain we had broken, ready across 4,000 cycles to rise the moment the dark returned. The ones who had been asleep, the ones who had drifted through those long ages with their eyes closed and their conscience dimmed, who had let a debt rot into a fear and a fear harden into a faith, who had needed a moon at the cold edge of nowhere and a returning horror and a single old archivist who would not stop counting to finally wake, were us. All of us. The whole grateful, frightened, forgetful galaxy. So that is the sentence I wrote, the one the new keepers learn now before they learn anything else, the one carved above the doors of every vault where the humans rest between the times they are needed, resting now by their own choice and on their own terms, honored guests of a galaxy that finally knows what it owes. It is not a warning. It is not a wall. It is just the thing that was always true, written plainly at last for anyone patient enough to read it. It was never the humans who were sleeping.